So this is a small chat about philosophy, about ethics in particular. One of the things I used to do with my son all the time is I just talked to him about all this stuff. You know, we were talking about Descartes when he was 4, you know, and I remember one occasion we were walking along in Costco, like you do, and just chatting away about this sort of stuff. In fact, I don't know what we were chatting about. And this older guy came up to us and he said, "What a fantastic relationship!" He said, "I've never seen a relationship like that between any parent and any child." And what's amazing about that is that A, it's true, and B, that it was completely unsolicited. So yeah, so I missed talking to George about that, and that's a bad thing. So this is just kind of cathartic for me, and maybe if some people get some interest out of it, then you know, great. So yeah, so you've got philosophy, philos, love. Sophos, wisdom. It's the love of wisdom, and a little bit of philosophy is ethics. That is, you know, basically how do we judge whether an act is a good act, whether is this a good thing to do? Well, there's something else, by the way, called meta-ethics, and as we'll know from the Greek, meta means above or beyond. So when we're talking about ethics, we're trying to decide what's good and what's bad and stuff. And meta-ethics says, well, what exactly is good? What does that mean? And so on. But we're not talking about that. We're assuming that we've all got more or less a sort of similar idea of what good and bad, or good and evil sometimes, you know, what these things are. So there are a couple of schools of thought, and you know, this is, well, there's more than a couple, but I'm just picking out a couple. And you know, I wanted to talk about this because I was thinking about this at 4 o'clock this morning. Like you do, you know, we can't help it, can we? So first of all, you have Judeo-Christian kind of ethics. Kant had quite a lot to say about this. He had these things called Categorical Imperatives, and they said, you know, the idea of categorical, you mustn't murder people, you must always suck the juice out of a tractor, never put your socks in a toaster, and never put jam on a magnet, you know, those kind of things. Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, so that's kind of duty-based deontology, that's called ethics, and that's all very good. And then you also have something called consequentialism or utilitarianism. So there's a difference between the two, but the difference doesn't matter for the moment. So what consequentialism says is that if you're trying to work out whether to do something, you know, there are no rules. You don't say, oh, that's always a good thing or that's always a bad thing to do. You just look at the consequences, and that also sounds pretty sensible, right? You know, now you always get a problem in philosophy and in ethics when you try and come up with a kind of one-size-fits-all kind of approach. You know, it'd be lovely, wouldn't it, to have like a morality machine, and you feed problems in the top and you get answers out the bottom. But you know, in order to have that morality machine, we've got to kind of work out the basis on which the engine kind of operates. What criteria does it use? So yeah, now so you've got the rules stuff, the categorical imperatives, the duty-based deontology stuff. You must always tell the truth, you know. So you know, you say, oh, well, of course you must always tell the truth. You know, that's great. Why not? Well, you know, tell the truth. But you know, there's a very sort of straightforward and well-known counterexample for this, which is the mad axeman counterexample. So yeah, this bloke breaks into your house in the middle of the night. He's mad. He's got an axe. That's how he got his name. And he says to you, right, where's your kids? I want to go and chop them up. I don't know. I think most of us would say, well, it's okay to lie there, isn't it? You know, it's okay to lie to him. So, you know, that's duty-based ethics out the way, really. They're gone. Yeah, consequentialism. So Lord Carlyle, I think, talked about, well, he talked about utilitarianism actually in this way. So utilitarianism basically is the idea that when you look at the consequences of an action, you have to look at whether or not, once that action has been done, the overall level of happiness is raised or lowered. So, for example, the trouble with that, you know, it sounds okay, but was it Lord Carlyle called it the philosophy of swine, I think? Because again, it's very easy to come up with a counterexample. One I've actually come up with, the Mad Axeman one is a well-known one. But yeah, counterexamples. So let's say, for example, I said to you, Roll, we don't have any rules here, so you know, torturing babies is fine, you know, whatever. If you torture this baby here, it will prevent this man over here torturing 1,000 babies. This is a kind of Sophie's choice thing, but you know, hyper exaggerated. Now, leaving aside for the moment whether you would actually be able to torture a baby in the first place, because very few people would be able to do that, I'm sure. Would it be morally right to cause a baby all of that pain and suffering in order to save 1,000 babies? I mean, the overall level of happiness in, you know, situation one of torturing one baby would be, you know, minus 573. Torturing 1,000 babies would be minus a zillion, right? So, given a choice between those two things, torturing babies is okay as far as consequentialism is concerned. I mean, it's deliberate oversimplification, but you know, that's kind of the basic thing. So yeah, duty-based ethics, that fails to sort of simple counterexamples. Consequentialism, that seems to have its own problems as well. But there we are, something to think about. Bye.